It is a little windy today, so I just want to let everybody know that in case the wind kind of takes a little bit of the sound out. But I'm going to flip the camera around and I'm going to introduce you to one of our rhino keepers, and then you'll actually be able to see the rhinos get released first thing in the morning. Let me flip this camera around. All right. Say hi, David.
Hi, guys. Good morning. My name is David. I'm one of the keepers here at Lion Country. And as a rhino keeper, our main job is we're in charge of the responsibility of the husbandry for all of the rhino. And husbandry is just basically a fancy word of saying their health. You're cleaning the exhibit, getting all the old food and hay cleaned up, putting down new food and hay, giving them new grain in the morning, their breakfast in the morning. And also we're in charge of cleaning up what we call midden pile, and that's basically where they all poop. Like you, they actually use a bathroom. They actually all poop in the same spot, so it makes it really easy to clean up. But also we're in charge of medicating them and getting a good close eye on them and looking at them every single day. And that's one of the reasons that we use this chute system. We'll bring them in from their exhibit every single night into an off exhibit area. That's just called Rhino Island. That's basically just for security, so it is a little more secure than the exhibit. So if a tree were to fall down on one of the fences during the night, we still have the rhinos, which are one of our more dangerous animals here at the park, secure on a little bit more secure island. So what one of our other keepers, Dan, is doing right now is he is in the process of starting to release our rhinos from their night quarters. So this chute system is a two-tiered chute system. There's two compartments to it. One compartment actually has a scale in it, so we can get daily weights on these guys if we need to. And that's the back half of the chute. And then the front half of the chute is a good place for us to be able to give them any kind of medication that they need. They usually get it in their grain. So we'll just mix it in with their grain, and then they eat it. It's usually either a powder or a pill. But also sometimes we have to give them topical. We'll give them topical medication. You'll see sometimes these guys will come out and they have some medication around their eyes to help with the fly control, and that sort of thing. But the chute system allows us to safely actually medicate them and get a good close look-up eye on them, and also be able to get our hands on them without putting the keeper ourselves in danger. There is obviously bars between us and the rhino. We never have what's called free contact. We always have what's called protected contact. So there's always something between us and the rhino. And even me here and our beautiful camera lady, we're inside the bed of a truck. So we are safe away from the rhino. So if you happen to come over, they're not going to be able to either accidentally or purposely run us over and push us over. An average full-grown white rhino, you're looking at about 4,000 pounds. So if they were to hit you, it'd be like being hit by a car. So it would hurt and injure you. So we're going to have our first guest come over and say hi as soon as she comes out.
So which rhino is this?
So this is Lainey. This
Hi,
is
Lainey.
one of let's see, Lainey now is about 9 years old. So yeah, so she's gonna come over and say hi. You see, they're very friendly. We do a lot of tactile enrichment with them. We do touch them from a very early on age. Usually the first week that they're born, we as keepers are trying to establish that relationship with them. It makes it a lot easier to be able to treat them and medicate them and look at them up close and be able to see if there's any kind of injuries on them, or if they're acting abnormal, or if their behavior is abnormal. So they are used to us touching them, and they are used to coming up close to us, which, as you can see, is pretty cool. It's one of the more cool things about my job is I get to work with animals of this size. And as you can see, for the most part, they're pretty docile. We jokingly say they're like giant puppy dogs. So
then at night, they get to go into this protective area to keep them safe. And then during the day, they get to hang out in the safari. And that's usually where the guests and everyone get to see them, right?
Yes, that's correct. So, and as you see, Lainey's going back to steal some food that we always give them a little bit of diet inside the chute. And that makes the chute a positive thing. We want any kind of training that we do with these guys to always be positive. We don't ever punish them for not doing what we want them to do. We always reward them for doing what we want them to do. So we want the chute to be a positive thing. We want them to be used to be in the chute, be comfortable in the chute. It is a confined space. So as you can imagine, anytime you're inside of a confined space, you might get nervous. These guys are the same way. But again, if we make it a positive experience, we pet on them, we touch on them, which they enjoy, and we also give them some food. So it's a positive experience. So as you can see, it's so positive that Lainey decided to go back and try to go back in the chute. So yeah, they come out of the chute every day and they go out into our preserve. The section that they live in it's probably about 60 acres, 60, 70 acres. So it includes all of this area you see, and then actually the other side of those trees is an area about this size. On the other side of there as well. If you've ever driven through before, you know the large size. They also live with the zebra, and we have some wildebeest out here as well. So there's a mixed species exhibit. But so they go out into the exhibit every day, and that's where they spend the majority of their day. And then they get the base of their diet at night, and that's actually why they come home at night. They know that's where dinner is, so that's why they come home, and they're anxious to come home by the end of the day.
So, David, the children actually, all these students had the opportunity to watch some educational videos on rhinos before joining in today, and that's very exciting. So they know some of the information, and I know a lot of the stuff that was asking about was their horn. And by the way, boys and girls, the noise that you hear in the back is the gates opening and closing because they're bringing the rhinos out individually for us today. So this is a very special treat.
Yeah, we always stop the rhinos individually. Again, that gives us a chance to look at every single one of them individually and get good up close look on them as individuals instead of having the whole entire herd. But yeah, Kristen, you mentioned the horn. A lot of questions I get about the horn is what the horn's made out of. And it's actually made out of a material called keratin. It's actually the same stuff your fingernails and your hair is made out of. So it's actually just tightly compressed fibers of hair is what forms their horn. It grows out of their skin. Actually, it's not even attached to the skull. It just grows out of the skin, basically like your fingernail does. It's basically a really big fingernail that grows out of their nose. But if you look at it when they come over, you can actually see the little fibers where they actually will file it. The same way as you guys may file or clip your fingernails. These guys do the same things with their horns. They'll rub them on logs, and we have tires out here and some of the metal gates. You can kind of see the little fibers right here. These are all little. This is what it is, just compacted fiber. So that's all it is. It's little pieces of hair, basically. Feels like bristles, actually, of like a brush. Is kind of what it feels like. But they'll shave it down. They'll file it the same way you guys file your fingernails or clip your fingernails. That's actually one of the ways we tell the rhinos apart. Is by each of their horns look different because each of them kind of like a different shape. They like a different length. So they will file that and shape it in order to kind of keep it the length and the form that they like. The same way as some people like long fingernails and some people like short fingernails.
So for social distancing practicing, how long would you say a rhino is if we're practicing social distancing?
So I'd say a rhino is probably a little bit longer than 6 feet. But if you stay a rhino's width apart from everybody, you will be safe as far as the CDC guidelines for social distancing. I'd say a rhino is probably, if I had to guess, maybe 8 feet, 10 feet. So if you're at least a little bit more than half a rhino away from somebody, you are safe social distancing, which is good practice.
So I actually have Chelsea here, and she's going to tell us a little bit about some of the STEM classifications, and then we're going to go ahead and answer a lot more the questions that came through with the students. So Chelsea, as the rhinos are being released, can you tell us a little bit about their classifications here? What makes them a rhino?
Sure thing, Kristen. So rhinos are mammals, just like we are. As you know, mammals are covered in fur, hair. Looking at the rhino, you probably saw that their skin is not as hairy as like chimpanzees, but they do have hair at the tips of their tails. You can see as the rhinos are walking away, their tails swinging. They also have little tufts of hair on their ears, and as David was saying, their horns are basically like same material that our hair and fingernails are made out of. They also produce milk for their young, and they do give live birth. In fact, there's one of our little babies coming over.
We're going to have the baby get a little bit closer, and then we're going to show you one of our babies, because I saw that was a question that the students were asking.
Yep, so there you go. There's a little baby. So they do have live young, just like all mammals do. And so what makes a rhino? They are an odd-toed ungulate. Ungulate is a fancy term for hoof. So they have 3 toes is what we call them. So that's an odd number. So their closest living relatives are going to be tapirs, horses, all of those odd-toed hoofed animals. So that's a little bit of classification of a rhino.
So David, can you tell us a little bit about the baby that the students just saw?
Yeah, so that was baby Bash. Baby Bash is a male rhino. He was born back in September, the end of September of last year. So he now is right around 6 months, if my math is correct. So that gives you a good idea of how big a 6-month-old rhino would be. When he was born, he was probably about 100 pounds, probably about the same size as a large puppy, maybe a Great Dane, puppy. So about 100 pounds, 150 pounds. Now he's probably right around maybe 400, 500 pounds. So they grow up pretty quickly. Mother's milk is, as we mentioned, they do drink milk. They are mammals. So mother's milk is really high in fat. So they do gain a lot of weight very quickly. But he is bad. He's actually pretty important to us because he is actually the third generation that was born in human care. A very important thing for zoos is conservation of the species. The white rhino is an endangered species. There's about 19,000 of them left in their native land of Africa. And so obviously in order to try to preserve this species, it is important for zoos and conservation organizations to breed that animal. And one thing you have to do in order to breed the animal is you want multiple generations. So it's very important that multiple generations are able to born human care. So he's actually our third generation that is born here. So his mother was born here and his grandmother was born here. And then his great-grandmother actually came to us back when zoos were started, and that's where we kind of got our stock from. But so he's pretty cool. That's actually our first third generation that we've had born at this park. So we're pretty excited about that.
Well, that is very exciting too, because out in the wild, they're definitely endangered, and they don't have as much protection that they would have here in the zoos. So zoos are actually trying to save the species, and that's awesome. And I know that the rhinos aren't the only animals here at Lion Country Safari that we participate. And don't you do also on the side, you help with a lot of the rhino conservation?
Yes, yeah. So the zoo and also even just zookeepers in general do a lot of stuff with organizations that are in their native land. That is an important thing for a lot of zookeepers, is they do want to protect the animal in their native land, as well as be able to educate people about that animal and the plight of that animal, the problems that animal has in the wild. So there are organizations. For the rhino example, one of the biggest ones that we participate in and help with is the International Rhino Foundation. And they help out with poaching patrols. One of the biggest problems for rhinos, and one of the reasons why they are going extinct, is because they are hunted by humans. That's because their horn is valued by certain groups. And so they are hunted and killed, and then that horn is then sold. So one of the things to stop that and help preserve the animal in the wild is they have poaching patrols. They have people going out and looking for those people that are hunting rhinos. And that, of course, costs money and also costs manpower and training. It costs trucks to be able to go out there and drive around. And so one of the things that the International Rhino Foundation does, that a lot of the zoos across the country, including Lion Country, help support financially, and also will help support with manpower. We have had keepers go out and help out with some of those organizations in Africa in order to protect the wild counterparts of the animals that we have the privilege of working with every single day.
So how many rhinos do we have here in Safari?
We currently have 13 total. What you'll mainly see in our main herd, or our main crash, as a lot of people, I know you guys learned that a group of rhinos is called a crash, which I think is kind of a cool name. Very fitting, you know. But we have 12 in our main crash. They're mainly made up of the females and their calves that we have. We currently have 2 calves. We have Bash and then his half-sister, Elna. And then we also have Bash's dad is our one male, besides Bash himself, is our dominant bull. We also have a retired bull named Buck. And bulls out in the wild are actually solitary. So Buck, you can a lot of times we'll see in his retirement home, in his bachelor group, as I call it, his bachelor pad. He's actually the oldest southern white rhino in human care. So we estimate him to be about 52 years old, which average lifespan for these guys in human care is right around mid to late 40s. But they obviously, as I said, Buck is our oldest and the oldest in human care in North America at 52. So that's kind of a testament of how well our healthcare is here at the zoo, and how great our veterinarians are, and how great our keepers are at giving the proper diet and the proper healthcare for these animals. So they have a longevity that's actually longer than what most rhinos are in the wild. Of course, hard to kind of tell what the longevity is for rhinos in the wild with some of the protein problems we have, but the best estimates we have are right around the mid to late 40 range. So Buck's kind of a special kid for us. It's actually my favorite animal here at the park is Buck's my buddy. So yeah, he's the rhino you see a lot of times. It's kind of off by himself in one of the other sections, but he's one of our old breeding males. He's actually had plenty of offspring as well that we have not only here at the park, but have actually sent off to other zoos as well to help educate kids and adults throughout the country and really throughout the world.
All right, everyone. So we noticed that the wind is picking up a little bit here, but I would love to open it up, and I'm going to let the teachers be the ones to decide on who they want to open the mics up to ask questions. But go ahead and the teacher will go ahead and unmic each student. And if you want to ask questions, we'll be more than happy to answer them. And we're actually still releasing the rhino. So as you're asking questions, you'll be able to see them walking around as well.
We also have our veterinarian. Speaking of the veterinarian coming up, she does come up on a regular basis to not only check the rhinos, but check all of our animals throughout the park. Mm-hmm. But you see that's Dr. Beth Hammond. She's coming up to check some of our rhinos, and we have some animals that you notice the Kingazi right here. I'm sorry, this is Eliza. Maybe has some pink stuff around her eyes. That's a swat. I don't know if any of you guys have horses. It's just a fly repellent. It helps keep the flies away from their eyes. But our vet does come up, as I said, on a regular basis and check our animals, especially ones that may be a reoccurring health instance for. So that's one of our other rhino keepers who just drove up. That's Craig, and all he's doing is you saw Eliza was kind of trying to hang around the chute, and we needed her to kind of go away so that we could get one of the other rhinos out. So we just went over there and encouraged her to keep it moving.
So with the guest traffic coming in, the rhinos are very used to people coming in and out. And now that our safari is open back up, which is very exciting for us, you'll actually be able to see these rhinos out in your cars now. So when you drive through, if you haven't been to Lion Country Safari before, you'll be able to see the rhinos up close and personal, which is very exciting. Chelsea, did you want to touch on a couple other things, or did we cover everything for you?
Sure. Actually, you know what might be a really good thing to talk about? She's one of our most recognizable rhinos out here is Lissa. Lissa is actually missing her primary horn. And David, do you want to tell us about Lissa?
Sure, absolutely. I don't know how long we'll be doing this video here, but if Lissa happens to come out, we'll be able to see her. Lissa is actually Eliza's mom, so the female that's over here, that's actually her mother is Lissa. But Lissa is one you may have heard about, one of our rhinos. She's right around her mid-30s. I'd have to actually look up when her birthday was, but she's right around there. But about 7 years ago, she presented with kind of an abscess at the base of her horn, kind of weird kind of growth that was having a little bit of ickiness coming out of it. And that's one of the things, as I said, one of the reasons why we do the release here, so that we can identify things like that. If we saw them from a distance, we probably would have never seen that abscess or have that abnormality. But because we do get them up close every single day, we're able to see that very early on. And we started treating it with medication to begin with. We gave it some oral medication. We thought maybe it was just a little bit of an infection or something like that. We tried to treat it with some, clean it out every single day, but it wasn't really getting better. And in fact, there were more that were kind of showing up, again, around the base of her horn. Their horn isn't attached to the skull. It is just attached to the skin. So it was kind of a weird, just an abnormality that was really weird. So we decided to do an immobilization, which is a knockdown, where basically we put them under anesthetic.
Just like you would with your dogs and your cats at a vet.
Exactly. Or even if you have ever had surgery before, you had cancer in her horn. She had a tumor that was actually about the same size as a softball. It was pretty large. And the horn is solid, as we talked about earlier. So the fact was really weird. And in fact, no other case in white rhino has ever been seen. There's been one case with a black rhino, but this is the first case we've seen with a white rhino. So we actually opted to reverse the horn and cut out the tumor. We actually gave her chemotherapy as well, the same as you guys would do when we get cancer. And she responded very well to it. And now her horn is actually growing back. And she is cancer-free. We actually have trained her through positive reinforcement to allow us to actually take voluntary x-rays. At the time, when it first presented, she wasn't trained in that behavior, which is why we had to immobilize her. Now we have her trained that she actually will stick her head out the front of that little V on that chute. And we can actually put the x-ray machine right next to her head, and she allows us to do that. We can take x-rays, and that way we can monitor to see if that tumor growth has come back. And right now, we are good. and she is healthy, and she's on medication probably for the rest of her life to help with that sort of thing. But she is a very good rhino, a good trooper. She was great through her chemotherapy. She took it all really well, which included anything from shots in her horn to topical rubs, to taking her oral medication, which made her better, which was great.
Perfect. That's awesome to hear that too, that there was such a successful situation for her and she's thriving now. So we're going to some of the questions for the students here.
Okay, I'm going to call on Frank. You have a question? You can unmute and ask the question.
Okay, they use like rhino horns and make sculptures out of them like they did with elephant tusks, or no?
I haven't really seen that a whole lot. Again, being made out of your fingernail, they don't really carve the same way ivory does. Rhino tusk, of course, is made out of ivory, and a lot harder of a material. The ivory is actually a modified tooth. So if you can imagine trying to carve into your fingernail or trying to carve into your tooth's going to be a lot easier to carve into. A lot of times they actually what they do with it is they shave it down, and they actually will put it in tea and drink it. They think it has medical properties to it, which is basically the same as chewing on your fingernails. So it's not, there is no medical basis behind it, but there is a belief that is what it does, which is what drives the poaching and the market for that item. It's also used sometimes for status symbols. They will give it to like their boss as a gift, but usually it's not carved. It's usually the whole rhino horn, and as I said, they will shave it down and use it as a medical.
Thank you so much. Anybody else have any other questions?
I'm going to call on Isabella from Miss Litvak's class, and then Daniel after that. Yeah, Isabella?
Of Isabella, maybe Alex.
Okay, you want to try?
Okay,
There we go.
I have
Go ahead,
two
Alex.
questions now.
One question.
One question.
Where are the rhinos going?
Whole entire section, which includes where we're sitting, but also it has the other side of the trees over there as well. So a lot of them like to go over there and spend most of their day on the other side. We do give them hay out in the morning, so they enjoy spending most of their day over there. And then, as I said, they're basically just trained that they get their diet at night. They get their dinner, so they will mosey back over this way during the day, and then they'll be usually sitting here at the gate ready to come home and have their dinner at night. So they have free range throughout. As I said, it's about 70 acres as far as their section goes. So they're going to the other side of those trees. They'll walk around the little lake we have over there. Rhinos really can't swim, so they don't usually go in the water. Their head is not able to be lifted above the flat line of their neck. So if they were to go in the water, they have the possibility that their nostrils could go underwater, which could obviously not be a good thing. So a lot of times they won't go very deep in the water, and they don't really swim, but they will wade. They do what's called a mud bath, which basically helps their skin, helps keep the bugs off, helps us keep the sun off. It's like a sunscreen. It also helps moisturize their skin. You may have seen the ones when they were up here close. They're kind of muddy and dirty. That's a natural look for a rhino. They love mud bath.
We'll go ahead and we'll take another question whenever anyone's ready.
I think she said Daniel was
Yeah,
next.
me.
I don't know which Daniel.
Okay, so I watched a video once about how rhinos are endangered and it's a tough time for them being reproduced. And I'm wondering, why do rhinos have a difficult time reproducing?
Very good question. So the rhino gestation, which is how long they're pregnant for, is almost 2 years. It's 16 months. So you know how us as humans, we're pregnant for 9 months. The rhino is pregnant for twice that long. So that's one reason. They will only have one calf, and they will usually only have one calf every couple years because they have to raise that calf, and they usually won't have another calf at the same time. So usually only have one calf at a time. Most times the calf stays with the mother till about 2 years old. And then usually about a year after that is when they will have another calf. So it's a long time between having babies. So if the population decline is greater than the number of births, that's when you're going to start running into problems with animals being killed and their population being declined. And of course, the less rhinos you have, the harder it is to have them breed, and they have less chance of being bred and having babies, which just furthers the problem. So that's the biggest reason, is their gestation is just so long, and they only have one at a time. It makes it difficult for the population to regain momentum.
That's a fantastic question, though.
Question.
Great question.
Okay, how about Ariel?
I know the wind is picking up a little
Ariel,
bit.
you
Can everybody hear us, though?
Go ahead.
Okay.
So about how many of them are still alive? Like how many of them
in the
are
wild,
still alive
there's 5 different species of rhino. The species we have here at the park is called the southern white rhino. There's about 19,000 of them left in the wild. The black rhino is another rhino that is in Africa, that shares the same habitat as the white rhino. There's roughly about like 8,000, 9,000 is the last number I saw as far as they go. There's also an Indian rhino, or greater one-horn rhino, which lives in the Asian continent, mainly India. There's about 5,000 of them left right now. And then there's 2 rhino species that live on the island, on 2 different islands in the Indian Ocean. One is the Sumatran island, which lives on the island of Sumatra. And the other one is the Javan rhino, which lives on the island of Java. Javan rhinos are most endangered. They're estimated to be right around, I think the last numbers I saw are around 40 rhinos. And then the Sumatran rhino, you're looking at probably about 100, maybe 200. The reason that they're more endangered is they live in a smaller area. They only live just on that island. So if they're poached on that island, their numbers are already small to begin with, and then the poaching just dwindles the numbers even more. And we run into the same problems we talked about with gestation and animals giving birth.
Thank you very much. It looks like our vet is starting to
get... Vet has checked what she wants to check as far as rhinos goes, and she'll go off, and as she is in charge of the veterinary care, we actually have 2 vets on staff. So her and the other vet we have, Dr. Ann Meyer, they're both in charge of all the veterinary health for all 1,000+ animals we have here at the park.
All right, so go ahead and we'll answer a couple more questions. We have another rhino being released now, so maybe she'll come over to the track while we're answering questions.
So let's hear from Broden next, and then Elena.
What is typical crash life like for the rhinos?
So white rhinos are actually the only rhino species that live in a crash. I think that's kind of an interesting fact as well. All the other rhino species I talked about are solitary for the most part. So it'll be a mom and a calf, and then the male will be by itself. The white rhino will live in a family group, which, as we talked about, is a crash. And their day basically consists of they live in a territory. There goes Elna. That's our other baby. She just came out with mom Bloom. So they live in the family group, and they live in a territory. So their job is basically going around and eating grass and, patrolling that territory. And they might run into some other rhinos. They might run into a male rhino. If one of the females is susceptible to be bred, you might have some breeding behavior going on there. But they're basically, their day is that's a very large animal. They in order to sustain their weight and their energy, they have to basically graze all day. So they're basically, their day, they're like giant lawnmowers. They go around the African safari and also the preserve here at the park. They spend most of their day just eating grass.
Helps our landscaping crew.
Yep.
Any last minute questions? I do want to let you know that we did receive quite a few questions. So what we'll do is I will have Education and David help answer those questions, and then we'll send it back to your teachers. So that way all the questions are answered to everything today.
Elena, go ahead and go.
How do you check what their gender is?
So just like males and females have male and female parts, the rhinos are mammals, so they have the same parts. So it's very easy to which is a male and which is a female really early on.
Madison, would you like to answer or ask your question?
What is the biggest a rhino can get to, and what's the smallest?
Okay, so when you talk about smallest, you're probably talking about different species of rhino. As I said, the Javan rhino is actually the smallest rhino, and you're looking at they probably average right around 2,000 pounds, right around there. An average for a white rhino, which is actually the largest of the 5 species, is the one that we have. The average is probably about 4,000, but they can get over that. Our Kingazi, who's one of the girls that came out early on, she usually averaged right around maybe 4,500 pounds. So yeah, you're looking about 4,000, 4,500 pounds, so about half a ton.
I have a question. We keep saying white rhinos, but they're not white.
We get that question a lot. White is a misinterpretation of the word vide. Vide actually describes their lips, and what the Africanese were trying to say is they have a wide lip. They're a wide-lipped rhino. They really could be rhinos. They're wide-lipped rhinos and not white. But the black rhino was discovered first by Europeans. So and they are a little bit darker color, but really they're not even black. But they were called the black rhino. That's what they were told they were. And then the white rhino was discovered, and the explorers who were with the Africanese guides, they kept saying this is the vide rhino. And the Dutch, mainly the Dutch explorers, misinterpreted that as white. Since they had the black rhino, they thought they were calling this rhino the white rhino. So that's why they have the name white rhino. They're more of a gray in color than they are white.
It's very interesting. Yeah. Do they see well?
They don't. Actually, they have great sense of smell, great sense of hearing. Their eyesight, they're very, very nearsighted. So even from this distance, we see them very well. Even through the iPad, you guys can see them very well because we have good eyesight as far as mammals go. Them to us, we are probably a blurry zebra striped, since the truck ran is zebra striped, blurry zebra striped giant vehicle or giant item. If any of you guys are nearsighted, you can't see things very far away without your glasses. That's the kind of the vision the white rhino has, or the rhinos in general, all rhino species. That's also one reason why you hear them kind of chuff or kind of breathe out a lot, because they get most of their information from their nose. They basically examine their world through the sense of smell. So they have to, if they exhale a lot of air, they therefore can take in a lot of air and take in a lot of information. So they hear very well. You notice their ears, they're always constantly moving. They can almost move a complete 180 degrees, maybe a little bit further. And you can see her right there. She just turned, and she probably hears me talking. And she obviously noticed something was, over here. So she turned her ear so she could get a better hearing. They're also very cone-shaped. Their ears are very cone-shaped, which helps focus the sound. Anything, if you've ever taken like a traffic cone and put it up to your ear, you notice you can hear sound so much better. That's the reason their ears.
Awesome. Thank you so much for answering these questions. These questions are fantastic coming through.
That's a great question.
So we'll take 1 or 2 more questions, and then what we'll do is we'll wrap it up, and then David and I will work on typing up the answers to the rest of them that came through earlier.
Enzo, you can unmute and ask your question.
Oh, okay. So what's the most aggressive type of rhino?
I would probably say black rhinos are probably the most aggressive, and that's just because they are solitary in the wild, and they kind of, in order to survive in the wild, they have to kind of be a little more on defense. It's not aggressive as much as just being defensive. They just have that natural instinct to be wary. White rhinos are social creatures. They live in crash, so they have the protection of the crash. They don't have to be as defensive as something that lives by yourself. You think about when you're with your friends, you're a little bit more relaxed than if you were to be by yourself. And then as far as the other 3 species, the Sumatran, the Javan, and the Indian, they live in a much more brushy, so they don't really encounter things as much as the 2 rhino species that live in Africa that live with a bunch of other species. You have giraffe and zebra and a bunch of different antelope species. And of course, predators as lions and leopards and crocodiles, African wild dogs. There's all kinds of predators that are out in Africa that they run into a lot more than some of the rhino species that live in a more forest covered area. So I'd say the black rhino is probably the most.
Okay, how about Leora? Is that how you say your name in that class, Hirschman?
Leora.
Go ahead. Okay, go ahead. Ask your question. And then Dylan Hollenshed, you're next, and then that's it.
Do Ryans only use
Go ahead, Leora.
Do Ryans only use their horn to fight and to protect their?
Yeah, that's the two main reasons why they have their horn is for protection. And this is Shatabi. This is our male rhino, our breeding male, our 6-year-old young breeding male who's Bash and Elena's dad. But so they'll use it. Males will use it for fighting for territory, and then females and males will both use it for defense against either other animals or against other rhinos. But they also will use it to dig in the ground. They'll make mud wallows themselves. Africa is a very dry country for most of the year, so you can imagine they'll go dig a hole, and that will sometimes dig into the groundwater and give them a chance to get into some mud. That, as I said, they love to take mud baths. So they do the same thing here. You'll see a lot of our areas that kind of have little divots and swells. When you drive through, they like to dig in the dirt with their horn. So they will use it for a digging tool as well.
Okay, Dylan, go ahead.
How tall do their horns get?
So most of the ones that we have here, they're probably about 2-3 feet. That's kind of the average for what we've seen, but I have seen pictures and video of some rhinos that will have 5-6 foot horns. As I said in the very beginning, each rhino is kind of different in how they like to shape their horn and file their horn. Some of them like long, some of them like short. Most of our guys just seem to like a little bit shorter horn, but they're still about 2-3 feet when they get full grown. You may have even seen when they were coming out. Kingazi, for example, she has a very long horn. Eliza, she has a pretty big long horn. But then some of our other ones, Anna, for example, she has a little bit shorter horn. So,
great questions.
And then we have one more, Nicole. You're still there, Nicole.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Where do you put them when it's in a big storm, when they have a big storm?
Oh, yeah. So great question. Yeah, very good question. So for a lot of the storms, these guys will just kind of huddle together and kind of protect each other. As I said, at night, we always put them into the sheltered area here. They have shelters throughout the park or throughout the exhibit as well. One of them is right here behind us. There's a total of I believe 6 or 7 shelters. They can go into those shelters, get out of the rain, get out of the thunderstorm, that sort of thing. If it does get too severe, we do have the option of bringing them back into their night quarters as well, where they have more shelters and actually have an enclosed barn. It's not a very large barn because we're in Florida. We don't have to worry about heat would be the biggest reason to have a barn. We don't have to worry about here in South Florida, but we do have a small barn that is enclosed on all 4 sides that if we had to, we could put them in there for a really severe storm. But even for like a hurricane, usually a lot of times we just keep them on the island and they're safe up there, and we don't have to really worry about them getting hurt during that major of a storm.
Thank you so much. All right, boys and girls, we would like to thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you, David, for taking the time out of your day today to talk to us. I think this was awesome. I'm sure, as you can see now, that the guests are starting to come through, and you'll see the rhinos walk right up to the cars, which is very exciting. So what we'll do is, if anybody has any additional questions, go ahead and send them over to your teachers, and we will go ahead and answer anything else for you. We hope everybody had an awesome day today, and we look forward to seeing you on safari soon, okay? Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Have a wonderful day.